Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my 2018 Nintendo Switch retrospective. If you haven't seen my retrospective series before, I like to go through a console year by year and just call out all the notable games that came out. So I'm not quite happy with top 10s, there's a lot of great games don't get talked about, so I kind of do this. I like to go through my collection, see what I missed that year, what I might still want to pick up, and just talk about those things. So yeah, let's get right into it. 2018 was a pretty big year for the Switch. There were over 580 games released total, and I mean, that's just a crazy amount. Now, granted, a lot of those digital games are garbage. It's really hard for me to sift through those and see what's good and what's not. Yeah, a ton of games, not all great, but I mean, the same thing with PS4, the same thing with Steam, obviously. So yeah, we'll get into digital games at another point. I just can't go through those fast enough. But this is my physical retrospective where we're just going through all the physical games, and man, were there even a ton of those. We're going to cover exclusives like always, and I'll get to the multi-platform stuff later. And if you're into gaming, you definitely want to check that out this year because multi-platform stuff is huge this year. Nintendo really stole a lot of mind share from Sony. A lot of games that would have been Sony exclusive came out on Switch, so yeah, that's a pretty big category this year. But to speak to the strength of the Switch this year, over 160 games were released physically for it. That's insane. That's more than the entire Wii U had. 45 of those releases were Switch exclusives, and almost all of them are pretty notable in some way, so actually I am going to go through every physical exclusive. I only cover the North American exclusives just because that's what I know, but it is an interesting year because across all systems we're starting to see this thing where physical versions of games that have come out only in the EU are actually really easy to get over here. They're sold directly from Amazon, so I don't know if that's really considered an import anymore at that point, but they aren't available in stores here, so that's a bit of a mixed bag. There's also some really good Japanese games that can be imported that have the English version on them, so that's worth looking into. A couple of those really worth knowing about. And Limited Run Games put out quite a few games for the Switch. Now, I'm going to get into two of those later on just because they're special. I'm still not going to cover limited stuff in this kind of thing because I feel like these retrospectives are more to celebrate stuff that's easily gotten or, more easy to get at retail and not quite these limited games that if you don't know about it before they come out, you're out of luck. Limited Run did put out about 21 Switch games this year, so a ton of stuff, and most of them were pre-orders. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you should be following them and try to get that stuff on pre-order when you can. Before I get into this year's games, I want to bring up a couple of re-releases from last year. Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, and Mario & Rabbids all got updated versions this year. They usually just come with like a little book or a new box, maybe a map, and maybe codes for some of the DLC in there. But yeah, those I'm not going to mention in here because technically they're old games. They just had new packages this year. So starting off the year is the Rocket League Collector's Edition. This is just worth a quick mention because Rocket League's physical Collector's Edition that was on PS4 and Xbox One was released on Switch in January. And then in February we got Mercenaries Saga Chronicles. This is an interesting compilation of the 3 indie tactical RPGs that were inspired by games like Final Fantasy Tactics and Ogre Tactics. The gameplay is a bit more simplified than most hardcore tactics games and it uses a 16-bit graphical style. The collection includes Mercenary Saga Will of the White Lions, which was only released in Japan as a mobile game, as well as Mercenary Saga 2 Order of the Silver Eagle, and Mercenary Saga 3 Grey Wolves of War, which were both released in English here on the 3DS eShop. Between the 3 games, there's apparently 82 story missions. Following that, not an exclusive, but one I definitely want to mention, Dragon Quest Builders. A very notable port that won't make it into the multi-platform episode because of when it came out, so I'm going to mention it here, but it's such a good mix of Dragon Quest and Minecraft. It's a natural fit for the Switch, so definitely worth playing if you didn't check out the PS4 version last year. Then, on to the first game I have in my collection for this year, and I'm kind of cheating here because this is the Japanese import version. That is Bayonetta 2. Now, Bayonetta 1 I'm saying didn't come out over here physically because it was a code only included in the North American release of the game. It's a real shame. A lot of companies are cutting costs by putting out smaller carts and including the stuff as codes. I, as a collector, don't really dig that, but yeah, so technically, only Bayonetta 2 came out over here. The reason I have the import version instead of the one that came out over here is because I was lucky enough to get, the Bayonetta Climax Edition from Japan. This is the only way that you can get Bayonetta 1 on a cart. It comes with both games, but it's stupid expensive. It was such a rare print, it's a shame, because I really feel like that game needs to be reprinted more. And I still have the Wii U version and the Xbox 360 version, but it's just a cool thing to have on modern consoles. It's such a great game. If you haven't played either of the games, Bayonetta is a character action game that may be the best in the genre. It's a slick, stylish game with deep and fun combat that's easy to pick up but challenging to master. And Bayonetta 2 is a Nintendo exclusive. I mean, it was on Wii U, but a lot of people didn't get a chance to play it, so I hope they do now that it's on Switch. Next up is a really interesting take on a classic RPG that's The Longest 5 Minutes. It's a retro-style 2D turn-based RPG that starts at the final boss fight. The hero has amnesia and forgets what he's doing and all of his abilities, so the game plays out as a series of flashbacks over the 5-minute boss fight, where the player learns more about their past and everything that led them to this point. While it is a turn-based RPG, it focuses less on traditional RPG combat and is more about the story and dialogue. The Longest 5 Minutes is technically a Switch exclusive for now, but a Vita physical version was announced for this year. And after that, the first big Kirby game for the Switch, Kirby Star Allies. This game is a traditional Kirby platformer that supports 1 to 4 players and has some interesting twists on the standard gameplay. In addition to Kirby stealing the powers of enemies, he can now also throw hearts to recruit up to 3 enemies into his party. These allies can be controlled by AI or other players. Kirby's abilities can also combine with his allies' abilities to give him different types of attacks. There's also some basic puzzle design where certain abilities are needed to progress. All in all, it's a fun game to play. It's a decent Kirby game. It's a ton of fun with friends. Next up is Penny Punching Princess, a pixel art top-down beat-em-up with a pretty unique premise. The game stars a princess whose kingdom has been taken over, and along with the undead Isabelle, she fights to take it back. The 2 playable characters have different abilities and attacks, but their concepts are similar. They each go through the stages filled with enemies and traps, collecting gold or a skull-like currency, and can optionally use that to bribe enemies or bypass traps that could be tough to get by normally. There's also a kingdom building system where in between stages you build up your kingdom to unlock new features. This was another game that NIS announced is going to come to Vita physically this year, so it's not going to be an exclusive for long, but still cool to have here at the time. And next up, Wild Guns Reloaded. Now, this is the remake of the SNES classic Wild Guns, which was a really cool behind-the-back shooter, Western-themed. This was released on PS4 last year, but the physical version did make its way to Switch, and I just had to mention it. It's just a fun game to have for 2 to 4 players on the go. And following that, Shantae Half-Genie Hero Ultimate Edition. This is technically non-exclusive because this is available on PS4. I don't know if it's on Xbox One, but this Ultimate Edition is exclusive because this is an updated version of the 2D Metroidvania platformer game that includes all the previous DLC bundled in, so this is the most complete physical release. The DLC adds 2 new story modes with new playable characters and 3 mini-stories that utilize costumes and abilities. Then we get to Nintendo's Labo. The first weird accessory for this generation is cardboard. In an attempt to bring maker culture to the Switch, Nintendo introduced Labo, a series of cardboard projects that worked with your Switch to let you make cool things. Each kit came with a Switch card that walked you through how to build the kit and then included some mini games to play them with. The first 2 kits launched in April, and the first one was the Nintendo Labo Toy-Con 1 Variety Kit. In this kit, you could build a vehicle they call an RC car that you put your Joy-Cons in and control it with a touchscreen. The vibrations for the Joy-Cons turn it or move it forward. A fishing rod that uses the Joy-Cons motion controls to let you play a fishing game on the Switch screen. A piano that let you play and even put in punch cards or waveforms to have it play sounds or a song. A bike handlebar that uses the Joy-Con motion controls to play a motorbike game. And a house that your Switch screen goes into to show you a scene of the inside. Changing things on the cardboard part of the house will change what's shown on the screen. Released at the same time, the second kit, Toy-Con 2 Robot Kit, came with everything you need to make a visor, backpack, and foot pedals to play the included mech game. The game lets you use your kit to control your robot and take on various missions. The robot can transform into a tank or jet and to switch up the controls and attacks. You can also play with 2 robot kits if you knew anyone who had another. Following that is Hello Kitty Kruisers, a pretty mediocre kart racer that stars Sanrio characters. It wouldn't really be worth mentioning, except that actually, this game did come out on Wii U and is one of the rarest releases on the console that collectors were always looking for. So now if you really wanted it, you can get a cheaper version. Following that is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, a port of the Wii U version of Tropical Freeze for those who didn't get the chance to play it back then. This is one of the best games in the series in my opinion, so I highly recommend it. Aside from all the Wii U content, it also adds in a new character, the Surfer Funky Kong, who has a new set of abilities. This is a must-have for my collection, but I'm waiting for a price drop because I already played through the Wii U version. And another Wii U update that did get a price drop, so I picked it up, a Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. This is the Legend of Zelda Dynasty Warriors mashup that originally launched on the Wii U and had a 3DS update. It's probably my favorite Dynasty Warrior style game. It adds in features, characters, and items from Zelda to make it a much more interesting experience. The game includes all the DLC from the Wii U version and 3DS version, adding those stages, characters, and items, but very little new here. Next up is Runner 3, the latest entry in the Endless Runner games that started as part of the Bit Trip series. This is available digitally on everything, but I think the Switch is the only one that got the physical release. After that is Fallen Legion Rise to Glory, a compilation of both Fallen Legion games, one which was released on the PS4 and the other on the Vita, but this also features a new exclusive Switch scenario. The game is an RPG that has a battle system that looks a lot like Valkyrie Profile, where each face button commands a different member of your 4-character party to attack. There's also a focus on building and ruling an empire. After that, another new Nintendo IP, Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido. This was a new puzzle game that was released for the 3DS and Switch that's all about matching up sushis to damage your opponent. The Maki moves along conveyor belts that each battler can use to make matches. There's also a belt in the middle that either side can pull from. The single player mode puts the player in control of a male or female Musashi who discovers how great sushi is after it's being banned by the Empire as the cause of the Great Sushi War. In order to fight the ban, you set out on a journey to make sushi and share it with the country, but have to go up against various rivals. There's also local and online multiplayer battles. Following that is Mucinix, I think that's how you say that, the rhythm game by the developers of DJ Max and Super Beat Sonic, featuring 50 tracks. Limited Run is putting out this game physically on the PS4 and Vita, but the Switch version is the one that was available through standard retailers. And then a game that got some good buzz this year after its last entry was so disappointing, Mario Tennis Aces. Nintendo tries some pretty different stuff here, adding in a ton of new mechanics that make this feel like a much deeper game than your standard Mario Tennis. Overall, the changes may have gone too far, complicating the gameplay a bit too much, but the story mode is back, which we haven't seen for quite a few entries, and that's definitely a draw for solo players. Overall, it's a fun game. I don't think it quite lived up to the hype of its original showing, but still worth checking out. Following that, we had Happy Birthdays. This is a Switch port of last year's PS4 game, Birthday's the Beginning, which is a populous-like god sim by the creators of Harvest Moon, where you modify the landscape in order to encourage life to grow and evolve. And then after its disappointing digital release, we got a physical version of Minecraft for Switch that has all the stuff from the Wii U version you would want. The cart here includes the base game and the Super Mario Mashup Pack, which was what the really interesting part of the Wii U release was. There was also a download code included that added some extra creation packs, and if you purchased the original digital version, a free update added all the new content. It's also worth noting that Nintendo teamed up with Microsoft here to promote their cross-platform play. So now Switch players can play together online with PC, mobile, and Xbox players, but still not PlayStation players. And another Wii U update, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker came out on the Switch. This game expands on the isometric mini-stages in Super Mario 3D Land from the 3DS and has you controlling Toad or Toadette, moving through stages and manipulating them, solving basic puzzles to collect the gems and reach the goal. In addition to the original game, there's new stages based on Super Mario Odyssey, and new support for the 3 Mario Wedding Amiibos. And then a real standout exclusive for the year, Octopath Traveler. How Square got players interested in Octopath is just as interesting as the game itself. They started by teasing it with a kind of concept demo released on the eShop last year, and then took user feedback through a survey. Then they put out a 2-hour demo before release and made it so your save game would carry over into the full release. It's a pretty smart way to get people who never played an RPG or wary of any Saga-like RPGs like I am to check it out. And it worked really well. It sold really well. The first 2 print runs I think completely sold out, and there was an amazing looking collector's edition that I regret passing on. It's pretty sought after despite not being so rare, but yeah, it's just a cool looking thing, and this is a great game that I wish I had paid more attention to up front. The game has a mix of 16-bit-like graphics with modern effects and filters that make for a really unique and impressive visual style. The stories are serviceable, but a bit of a letdown for anyone expecting something like Square's SNES RPGs. The biggest disappointment is that the character stories don't really connect at all, which is maybe the one thing that I do really appreciate about those old Saga games. The battle system is a great update of the standard ATB system, which focuses on enemy weaknesses and offers a job system for further character customization. And thankfully, the leveling is much more traditional than that of a Saga RPG. The randomness there is what usually kills those games for me. Following that, we got Candle, The Power of the Flame. A mix of a puzzle platformer and point-and-click adventure with a great 2D watercolor style. In the game, you play Teku, who's trying to save a kidnapped shaman from a rival tribe. You can easily import the EU PS4 version from online retailers, but I think the Switch version was the only one that was officially released over here. And after that, we got Go Vacation. Now, I didn't know much about Go Vacation when I did my original Wii retrospective, so I'm making sure to call it out here for its fans. It was a good multiplayer minigame collection set around an island with 4 resorts and 50 different minigames. I don't think this one has any new content, but the controls for some of the minigames have been apparently improved, which I know was some of the criticism from the original version. Since the Switch doesn't really have an official Wii Sports, I mean, this is a good choice for people really looking for that, a good thing to play with the family. It's not quite a replacement for that or Wii Sports Resort, but it's a kind of take on that style of game. And next up, an update of an old 3DS game that's definitely worth knowing about, Code of Princess EX. This game is a spiritual sequel to Guardian Heroes, but with some design issues that really hold it back. It's a beat-em-up broken into a ton of small missions, making up a story mode, free play mode, and bonus quests. The game features over 50 playable characters, each with multiple weapon options. The biggest benefit to the Switch version is that it's easier to play local multiplayer with 2 to 4 players. Unfortunately, the sprite scaling with the original assets lead to some rough visuals, and the missions are way too short and grindy. I want to love this game, but I wish they just completely reworked the level structure to string together the tiny missions into longer ones. And following that is Sultan Sanctuary, which I think is the only physical release of the 2D action RPG game, which in my memory was one of the first retro games to ever be called a Souls-like. It features a dark and moody visual style, and it's basically a Metroidvania with difficulty, pacing, and class progression system inspired by games like Dark Souls. You collect and use salt to raise your stats, and there's a ton of weapon types. Following that is Slain Back from Hell. This is a heavy metal-inspired retro-style action platformer that was really rough when the original version was released on PC. But this updated Back from Hell version is considered better. It's known for its style and being pretty difficult, but the Switch version had some issues that I think have been patched in. I'm not quite sure if it's still worth checking out or not, I haven't checked it out yet, but if you're into this kind of games, maybe something worth looking into. This is another case of an easy-to-get EU PS4 version, but the Switch version seems like the only one that officially released over here physically. And after that, Voez. I think that's how you say that, I'm not sure. A physical release of one of the earliest digital exclusives on the Switch. It's a rhythm game with a simple but unique interface and indie Vocaloid-like music tracks. And just for a funny mention, Rocket League also got in August an Ultimate Edition. So just over a half a year later of the original physical release, we get another version that's just more expensive with more DLC packed in. I think this was likely timed to release with the Switch Online service we're going to talk about soon. Otherwise, I'm not sure why they threw this out, but this did come out on other consoles as well, so it's just, interesting. Following that, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Just like Monster Hunter 3 and 4 had Ultimate Editions, the latest portable entry, Monster Hunter Generations, got an updated version which came out in a Switch port. Aside from the visual and control updates, the game features 2 new hunting styles, new hunting arts, and 20 more monsters. So a big year for Monster Hunter. Fans who maybe thought Monster Hunter World was a bit too different, here's your classic. Then God Wars: The Complete Legend. An updated version of the PS4 Tactics RPG with a setting and story based on Japanese folklore. It includes the original game with all the DLC, a new character, and a new 50-level dungeon expansion called the Labyrinth of Yomi story. So that's definitely worth checking out if you like the original game to see that new content. And after that, the third and latest Labo kit, Toy-Con 3 The Vehicle Kit. This thing has a steering wheel with attached levers, knobs, and a pull cord, as well as a submarine control stick with 2 rotating sticks and a button, and a flight stick. There's also a foot pedal that works alongside all 3, and a spray paint can that you can use in the Customize Studio to paint your vehicles. The game lets you move the Joy-Con between the 3 parts to swap between the 3 vehicle types. Games include an open-world adventure game with different objectives, 3 completely different racing games, and a battle game with a track builder. Some of the games include 2-player modes, including a co-op mode for the adventure game. That's worth checking out if you've got this thing. Moving on to an online exclusive, but one that wasn't too limited, Undertale got a release. So another physical version of a previously Sony exclusive, but this one feels right at home on a Nintendo console given how much it's inspired by the Mother series. Fangamer released regular and collector's editions, so you have to order it from them online. They weren't limited for pre-order on release, but I think they're currently sold out right now, though you can sign up to be notified when they get more if you're interested. And then on September 19th, the Nintendo Switch Online service officially launched. Most games that had multiplayer online modes required it to keep playing online. For some special cases like Fortnite though, it didn't require it. So yeah, basically this is Nintendo's official service that you gotta pay, I think it's like $20 a year, and without it you can no longer play most online multiplayer games. Players could also use a companion app on their phone for voice chat. It also lets subscribers back up their save data through the cloud and offered some special deals or exclusive in-game content. The app on the Switch gave access to a series of NES games that could be played while the subscription is active. New games are added monthly, and some special versions of games were also released. What I found most interesting was that there were a few Famicom games here that were never released in English on the NES. There's also a special offer available only to subscribers to get a pair of NES-style controllers for the Switch through Nintendo to play these games with. But you gotta order those directly through the Nintendo website. And to the next game on my table, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna, the Golden Country, which is kind of the expansion to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The standalone release of the 5th expansion pack from the Xenoblade Chronicles Season Pass is a new prequel story set 500 years before the main story and uses an updated combat system. The physical version also features a code to download the first 4 smaller expansion packs, which are mostly new items and quests for the original game. You have to have that to use it, but I'm sure you do if you have this. Following that was Namco Museum Arcade Pack. This pack combines the 2 Switch digital games, Pac-Man Championship 2 Plus, and the Switch version of Namco Museum, which contained 11 classic games: Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Tower of Druaga, Sky Kid, Rolling Thunder, Galaga 88, Splatterhouse, Rolling Thunder 2, Tank Force, and Pac-Man Vs. It's a pretty interesting selection, and probably still worth it for the price, but I'm always a little disappointed when these collections don't contain everything that past ones did. The Wii Namco Museum, for example, had nearly twice as many games included. Now, like I said, this is still great, but still a bit disappointing that it can't be the most complete version released to date. Following that, in October, we got Super Mario Party. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Mario Party series, but I have heard some fans say that this is one of the best Mario games in quite a while. The standard mode features your traditional 4-player boards, where each character moves separately again. You can also play with the partner play mode, which is a team-based version that allows for free movement around the board. And there's also an option to sync up and lay out multiple Switch consoles, an interesting way to mix up the play areas for some of the mini-games. So this is something I do want to check out. I probably won't put too much time into it, but when it drops in price, I'll pick it up and check it out. Then we get Goosebumps the Game. Now, this is a port of WayForward's 2015 prequel to the Jack Black movie, and it's notable for being the only physical version of that game, but I know the game was pretty badly received. And while it does take a lot of flack and is mediocre in a lot of ways, including the story, graphics, and puzzles, I will give WayForward some credit for trying to create the game as an homage to games like Shadowgate. It's a point-and-click adventure in which you explore a mansion full of monsters from the Goosebumps book series. Then a huge release in my opinion, The World Ends With You Final Remix. One of the best and most innovative JRPGs on the original DS finally gets ported to something else. This features new controls, co-op play, and a new day of story content. If you haven't played it, the game takes place in Shibuya in Tokyo, where the characters are trapped in a game where they'll die if they can't complete the objectives. The battle system has you controlling 2 characters at once to do different attacks and take out enemies. While it's best played off TV with the touchpad, the Joy-Cons are pretty interesting. The way they use the motion controls to fake a pointer that you move around the screen is pretty decent, and actually it's something that, while it doesn't work perfectly here, I miss in other games, like point-and-click adventures that could really benefit from it. This game is super stylish, it's a ton of fun, it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't played it before. Then we get a pretty big release. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it ended up being. That is Starlink Battle for Atlas. Now this was Ubisoft's Toys to Life game that I was really cautious of because I've been burned by many Toys to Life games before. I always get sucked into those rabbit holes of buying all the stuff for it. And I held off on this one until I found out it was actually pretty good. And the Star Fox content really pushed me over to get the Switch version. So even though this came out on everything, the Switch version is the one to get because of the exclusive content. The game is a solid space shooter where you travel between planets, taking out enemies and completing mission objectives. The big thing here was you put your Joy-Cons into the included dock, which you could then attach your pilot, ship, wings, and weapons to, and it changes up your ship, abilities, and weapons while you're playing. If you don't care about physical stuff, you could just buy the digital versions, and you get everything and don't have to use the dock, but it is pretty cool to change stuff on the dock and see it play out in the game. The Switch version came bundled with Star Fox as a pilot and the R-Wing as a ship, and they're integrated in the game in a really cool way. You can play through the whole story mode as Star Fox. He just happens to be around when the main game takes place and decides to help out. There's new scenes showing Star Fox, Falco, Slippy, and Peppy as part of the main story, and there's new missions where they hunt down Wolf. So it almost feels like a Star Fox game in that way. Like quite a few other physical games on the Switch, however, the cart doesn't have the whole game on it, so it won't work unless you've downloaded the massive patch, but for all the other physical stuff, I have to include it here. And next up is Just Dance 2019. Now, I have to put this here. It's not exclusive. This thing is available on everything, but I'm not going to make any more Wii or Wii U retrospectives, and I just have to tell everyone that yes, Just Dance 2019 did come out on the Wii and Wii U physically, so that's just crazy. Following that, another game that's just really interesting, Gal Metal, the World Tour Edition. This is a cool rhythm game where you control the drummer in an all-girl metal band that plays music to fight off an alien invasion. There's also a strange body-sharing element to the plot, where you're actually playing a boy that the aliens made take control of that girl's body. It feels really out of place. I'm not sure why that's there, but yeah. The gameplay is really interesting in that it's all freeform. You learn different short drum lines throughout the game and can use whichever ones you want during the songs. As long as you line up your notes with the beat, you score points. And the more complex and varied lines you play, the higher your score. You can use the buttons or use the Joy-Cons like drumsticks, which is fun. There's really only 3 notes you can hit, left, right, or both together. There's no on-screen indicators or anything, you just have to match the beat with your music, so it can be pretty tough to get the hang of, especially if you're not musically inclined like me. But the scoring system is extremely generous to make up for that. The physical release was called the World Tour Edition because it comes bundled with the DLC, which adds 5 new band members with their own story and song, for a total of 18 tracks in the game. Following that is Sports Party. So if Nintendo isn't going to bring a Wii Sports-like game to the Switch, Ubisoft is glad to try and fill that niche. Unfortunately, they didn't do too good of a job, apparently. This is a collection of sports games where 4 players can customize their avatars and play frisbee, jet skiing, basketball, golf, skateboarding, or beach tennis. But by the reviews I've read, it's all pretty mediocre, so that's a shame. Just in time for Halloween, on October 30th, we got Yomawari The Long Night Collection, a collection of the great 2D horror games where you explore haunted towns, solving puzzles, and getting around ghosts from Japanese urban legends. The first game, Yomawari Night Alone, originally released on Vita and tells the story of a girl who has to search the haunted town for her dog and sister. The second game, Midnight Shadows, was originally on the Vita and PS4 and is the story of 2 girls who were separated after a festival and trying to find each other. Both games have cool visuals, a great atmosphere, and interesting stories with some pretty shocking moments, and it's really worth noting that the Switch version seems to fix the crashing issues that were a problem with the Vita versions. After that, Carnival Games. This again was released for everything, but just deserves a mention here because of how notable it was as one of the best-selling Wii games of all time, which really speaks to the audience that console managed to reach. Then a really cool compilation for the year, SNK's 40th Anniversary Collection. This is a collection of SNK's pre-Neo Geo arcade titles, which includes 19 titles, 5 arcade-only games, 6 games with the original arcade and NES ports, and 2 NES games. An extra 11 arcade titles are available for free through patches and DLC, and the game includes both the English and Japanese versions for all the games. There's also arcade settings, save states, a rewind feature, and multiple control options. One cool thing about it is that one version of each game also includes a watch mode, where you can watch a pro speedrun of the game and learn how to play it better. We did 2 reviews covering the original 19 games and the 11 added later on, so check that out for an in-depth look at what's included. Then, a game that I was pretty hyped for, that I don't think anyone else was, it got a lot of crap, but actually turned out to be even better than I expected, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I was more interested in this than a regular Pokemon release just because I'm tired of mainline Pokemon games. Let's Go is basically a remake of Pokemon Yellow, but with the Pokemon catching replaced by the throwing Pokeball mechanics from the mobile game Pokemon Go. I personally love how it changes up the pacing from the traditional series. The game features the original 151 Pokemon and their Alola versions. You can still battle other trainers and gyms, just like you could in old Pokemon games, but now you no longer have to fight wild Pokemon to weaken them before catching them. So you just burn through all that catching Pokemon stuff and can focus on combat for battles that matter. You also can see the Pokemon in the wild and approach them instead of just having to rely on random encounters to know what you're going to catch. The one thing that turned out to be really cool that they didn't really push before launch is just how much of a remake this thing really is. It really does feel like those first Game Boy games, which is amazing. The difference in the two versions is basically just the exclusive Pokemon. Both versions I think have around 11 exclusives. The game launched alongside or bundled with the Pokeball Plus, which was a Pokeball that could be used to control the game, or like the Plus attachment for the Pokemon Go mobile game. It also came with Mew in that Pokeball, so you can move that into your game. You could transfer stuff from your Pokemon Go mobile game into this version. Just a ton of cool stuff here for fans of Pokemon. If you ignored it because you thought it was just some port of the mobile game or something, it's worth checking out. It is really fun. I don't recommend getting both versions like I had. We had free points to redeem somewhere and basically got the Pikachu one for free, so that's what Michelle's playing, and I'm playing this one. So yeah. Following that is Club Unlimited 2. This is just a standard racing game that's a Switch exclusive, and I don't think there's really much worth saying about it. And another game that I think sold out on release, was pretty tough to get, I know, Katamari Damacy Reroll. This is a remake of the original Katamari game that brings back the fan-favorite gameplay with updated graphics, all new cutscenes, and optional motion controls with the Joy-Cons. If you've never played the series before, the game involves rolling a ball around an environment and picking up objects to make the ball bigger, which then lets you pick up bigger objects. The goal is to make the ball as big as you can in each stage within the time limit, and it's simple and a ton of fun. All of these Katamari games are great fun. If you've never played one, I do recommend it. Then a huge release for the year, probably the biggest release that is worth playing if you aren't, don't think you would love it. I think you should check it out. I'm not a big enough Smash fan to say that Ultimate is the best, but it's definitely my favorite. And that's just because of the sheer amount of content in it. Ultimate brings back every fighter from all the previous entries and adds a bunch of new characters including Chrom, Daisy, Dark Samus, Inkling, Isabelle, Incineroar, Ivysaur, Ken, King K. Rool, Ridley, Simon, Richter, and it has a total of 74 fighters at launch. DLC promises to have some really cool characters as well. They've announced the Piranha Plant was available to Day 1 purchasers, and Joker from Persona 5 has been released. So they promise some cool characters. I can't wait to see what else is coming out there. Each character comes with costumes and music tracks from their franchise, and that adds just a ton more nostalgia to the game. There's a ton of modes here, including several Smash Battle modes, a classic mode where each player has a different lineup inspired by their games, the World of Light single player mode, and many others. The World of Light mode is a blast for people who like to play Smash alone. It features a big world map that you move through and take on interesting battles and unlock characters that you can then use in the upcoming battles and to bypass obstacles on the map. This is the main mode that uses the game's new spirit system, which lets you equip spirits that you can collect, upgrade, and combine to customize your fighter in different ways. Another neat feature here is that the classic mode can be played co-op with 2 players, so there's a ton to do there if you're looking for a good 2-player co-op game. It's definitely worth going through every character's classic mode because it's not just the same thing for every character. And following that, Party Arcade, a minigame collection that tries to simulate a Dave & Buster's or Palladium kind of environment. You play through games like skee-ball, hoops, air hockey, putting, or, little arcade games to earn tickets to exchange for gear. I mean, it seems interesting, probably a fun game for kids. It's a cool idea, I bet the execution isn't that great, but it's definitely interesting. So that was the last release of the year, but there's 2 other games I want to mention that came out in December. And I said earlier, I don't think limited run game stuff belongs on here, and that's just because, those games are limited and you have to know about them when it's time to pre-order them or you just can't get them. But they did something different this year, something special, or maybe you consider it scummy, I'd understand that. And that's that they took 2 of their releases and they made a deal with Best Buy to put them out at retail through Best Buy stores. So one of those games I have here, the Switch exclusive Golf Story, which is definitely worth checking out. And they did Ukulele, which is multi-platform, so I'm not going to mention it too much here. But yeah, Best Buy made a deal to order 25,000 copies of each. So, that's a fair amount. It's not as much as any other retail release usually, but it's way more than the amount that Limited Run usually puts out, which I think is probably about 5,000. I'm not sure how many of these they sold on pre-order. If you haven't played Golf Story, you should check it out. It is a 16-bit JRPG, but instead of random battles, you play golf. The game has you trying to become the best golfer, and you explore the golf club and surrounding areas, taking on challenges, and playing golf with opponents to progress. It's a neat take on both JRPGs and golf games. Lastly, you might have noticed that there's a Fortnite box on shelves in the stores for the holidays, and that only contains a code, so not worth mentioning because, it's just a box. And that's it for the physical Switch exclusives for 2018. Now, if you're only into Switch stuff, I do recommend you stay tuned for my multi-platform episode for whenever that comes out. It may be a month from now, I'm not sure. It's a lot of stuff to get through because there were a ton of multi-platform games this year released on the Switch. Just in my collection alone, I have all of these, and I usually buy stuff on PS4, not Switch, so that just goes to show you how many great games came out on Switch that were multi-platform this year. So yeah, subscribe and stay tuned for that if you're not subscribed. Thanks for checking out this episode. I appreciate it. If you want to suggest any digital games that I should know about for my digital retrospectives, that would help me a ton since I can't really keep track of all that stuff. I appreciate that. Mention them in the comments. Talk to me about your favorite games this year in the comments too, and talk to you guys later. Okay, bye.